All right, let's kick off. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our, is it second sort of no, third virtual tasting of 2022. Tonight we are talking all about Bushmills, the most famous and oldest whiskey distillery in the world. They've been around for a very long time, over 400 years. We're celebrating St. Patrick's Day. I know we're a couple of days ahead here in Australia, but being of the Irish theme. And this is the official launch party of the Bushmills Douro cask that we bottled for Australia in the whiskey list. Because of COVID lockdowns, we didn't actually get to do tastings when we launched it in Christmas last year in November. So getting everyone together tonight to actually do a group tasting for it properly is super exciting. And to lead tonight's tasting, I'm very, very humbly pleased to introduce a good friend of the whiskey list, Colum. Colum is the master distiller, the youngest master distiller, actually, I've just learnt, of Bushmills. He's been in the business at Bushmills for 20 plus years. He is in charge of the entire process from picking the grains through distillations, right to picking the amazing whiskey and casks, including the Douro tonight. So he's the one to answer all our questions for us. Master Distiller Colum Egan. Welcome, mate.
Well, thanks, Oliver. It's great. And hi, everyone in Australia. And I just want to really say how jealous I am because you're that much 12 hours closer to St. Patrick's Day. One of the best days of the year for me. So really looking forward to tomorrow. It's a day to get together with a few friends and have a nice few drinks. And I have a few special ones set up for myself and my buddies tomorrow. And Douro is actually going to be one of them. So I do like that one. As Ali said, my name's Colum Egan. I'm the master distiller here at Bushmills, and I suppose I'm in the privileged position. I haven't been introduced as the youngest master distiller for about 20 years, Ali, so it's good. It's gone back a little while. I suppose I've had an amazing time here at Bushmills, really going through all of the super whiskies. And I suppose as master distiller, I'm pretty much just a guardian here at this particular point in time. We've been making whiskey for over 400 years. So I suppose what I'm dealing with a lot of the time is whiskey that my predecessors have laid down in barrels. So I always have to make sure that the innovation part continues on for future generations. So we also have to be looking at see how can we pick different tastes, different nuances, what people are going to appreciate in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years time. So that's really the fun part of what I get to do. But I suppose one of the key parts is that we have to maintain the same Bushmills taste. So the easiest thing maybe is have variation in anything, but to get the same consistent great taste on every single bottle of Bushmills, that's probably one of the hardest things that I have to do. But also really enjoyable at that. And I suppose just to show that, I thought what we'd start with is one of the black bush. So if you want to raise your black bush, have a little nose of it. So black bush, it's unusual in that it is 80% single malt, and it's only 20% of a special grain. And that special grain is mainly it's actually put through a pot still, and also it's used. It's a different type of blend. In that it's actually made from some barley as well, so it's very unusual, the black bush as a whiskey itself. It's unusual to get a blended whiskey with such a high amount of single malt. So just really on the nose then, this is really typical, I suppose, Bushmills. This is what's the heart of every Bushmills, and you get that fruity, spicy character that's really at the heart. And then you begin to get these little floral notes that are coming through as well. So again, very pleasant on the nose. So actually, really with most Bushmills, when you nose it, actually draws your nose into the glass. So a lot of other spirits, a lot of other whiskies, when you put your nose in the glass, you actually ended up pulling away. But Bushmills is distilled 3 times. So it actually draws you in. And if you put it to your ear, it says, "Try me. Drink me, you'll love me." Yeah, I see Steve there. You're doing it. Did you get it? You're on top of my page there, Steve. So Blackbush. Now take a sip. For me, when I take a sip of Blackbush, I almost get the impression that it floats on my tongue. It just kind of sits on top. It sits on top and then just floats down. And just when it gets to the back of my throat here, you get this lovely sweetness coming through. And that sweetness then is mixed in with a little bit of nuttiness. And then you get nice sweetness on the inside of my cheeks. And then you get the big Bushmills fruity character on your tongue. And typical Bushmills then, that fruitiness just really grows and grows the more that you actually roll your tongue.
I was going to ask, so this fruitiness will be, obviously it's part of the signature tasting notes of all the Bushmills, and you know, it's highlighted even in some of the single casks. Does the fruitiness get stronger as we go through the age statements, or is it at its strongest in the Black Bush?
No, I think really what we're trying to do, Ollie, is create different whiskies, you know, to match every taste and match every occasion. So yeah, I think in the heart of every Bushmills, you got that fruity spiciness. But then what we try and do is add layers of complexity on with the different brands. So one, age adds complexity, but different barrel types add different complexity also. So what we try and do is, as you'll see, the 10 now will, the intensity of the fruit actually decreases, but the vanilla and the toasted wood increases. So it's always a balance of what we're trying to do on the different whiskies. Black Bush, I suppose what I like is when you triple distill, and why you triple distill is you try and get to this core taste that exists really at the center of in the still house. So we remove and we distill away. It's almost like maybe peeling an onion. So we're peeling away some of the heavier tasting compounds that perhaps they like in Scotch and in American whiskey. And what we like in Ireland is more that lighter style, but just full of flavor. So typically when you triple distill, you get a base fruitiness at the center. So what I like to do is then emphasize some of the distilled characters by using different types of wood. So we use sherry to emphasize the fruitiness that exists there from the actual distilling process itself. So we're not artificially putting anything in there. It's actually emphasizing a lot of the characters to it.
That makes a lot of sense now. You've kind of broke it down like that. I was just about to ask anyone in the audience got some tasting notes, but Steve beat me to the punch here. Christmas pudding / plum spice. Oh, good nose, mate.
Good. But again, you know, and that's the wonderful thing about taste, because we have taste is a memory, and it's what really goes back in time, what reminds you of that taste. Yeah, so yeah, Christmas pudding. I think when we get on to some of the older single malts, that actually is even more exaggerated. Again, you get that lightness, that almost floating effect that you get in Black Bush, and then it comes back up, bam, with that big fruity character in front of your palate, and a little bit of sweetness then in front of your tongue as well.
Yeah, great. I was just conscious of time because we want to keep things moving. Let's get everyone pouring the next whiskey, and then Colum, I might get you to kind of explain a bit of I know you touched on triple distilling, but a little bit more of the production process. I know there's some changes and growth happening at Bushmills. Keen to kind of unpack a little bit of that.
Yeah, so you know, we've been making whiskey at Bushmills for a long time now, so we haven't happened upon Black Bush or the single malts. These really have the flavors and the tastes, and the way that we make whiskey has been handed down from master distiller to the master distiller. So as I say, I feel privileged to be in that position, to be the custodian really of that knowledge at the moment. So there is a very particular way that we make Bushmills, and we're so proud of the fact and how we make it that we actually welcome people right around through the working distillery. So we're used to having like up to 150,000 people, and we'll show them exactly how we make the whiskey, because we make it the right way. We make it the same way that they made it 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And really simply is we've only have 2 ingredients. So one of the reasons the distillery was sited here all those years ago was, one, the water source. So the water flows over basalt rock. And if anyone has seen, there's some wonderful images of the Giant's Causeway. It's one of the natural wonders of the world, and nature is very regular, but the Giant's Causeway is made up of perfectly 6-sided shape, very straight line stones. So our water flows over basalt rock. The causeway is only about 6 kilometers from the distillery itself, so that picks up a certain mineral composition. Also then barley is our second ingredient. So we have a very particular type, and specification that we have for barley. And so that is grown in Ireland, and we get it malted in Ireland. So malting means really where you replicate nature. So you allow the seed to grow. So if the seed is in the soil and it gets some moisture and it gets some heat, the seed then begins to develop roots. So the roots need some food. So what happens, there's this, if you cut open a seed of barley, there's this white stuff inside. And basically that's the food that the seed needs to grow. And it's packed, tightly packed, it's called starch. So what happens is nature's a wonderful thing. So it's in the sea, it's in the ground, it gets some heat, it gets some moisture, it starts to break down these complex sugars into simple sugars, and then it uses those to grow. So we replicate nature in the malting process, where we put it into these big tanks of water, we allow the seed to grow for about 5 days, and then we stop the growing process by drying the barley. So one of the key differences between Bushmills and maybe whiskies that in a lot of Scotland is the way that we dry the barley. So in Bushmills we air dry the barley, whereas in a lot of Scotch, not at all, but a lot of Scotch, they smoke dry the barley with peat. So that's why in some Scotches you get that smoky peaty aroma, whereas in Bushmills the complete absence of any smoke or any peat. So just a different style, all great whiskey, just a difference in style. And it really comes from how you dry the barley rather than where the water came from.
And you do all that, you do that in-house, right?
Well, we did all of the malting in Bushmills up to about 20 years ago, just before I arrived. But it really, I suppose we outgrew the malting. So it was called a floor malting. So it was all very manual. So it was also manual, but also it was a lot of variability in it. So the malt would have some variation in it. Now we actually work with a professional maltster. So we work on what barley we take, how they actually run we agree the programs that they use, and then we agree the spec of the malted barley coming in.
And that at least, becomes consistent year on year, and you can focus then on making good whiskey, right?
Yeah, because there's I suppose when you talk about wine, you talk about terroir, but really, I suppose the malting process takes out a lot of the variability in the barley from year to year. So we get very consistent barley from year to year. So that terroir from the barley really isn't so prevalent in the whiskey business. So I see everybody looking for another whiskey. So I think we can have the 10-year-old. I've already been given out to, because this is the new packaging, but you can look out for it. So it's hot off the press. So these will be making their way to Australia in the next 6 or 12 months. So the 10-year-old, the whiskey hasn't changed, you'll be happy to know. So yeah, 10 years ago, we distilled this whiskey. So it's amazing when you think, wow, what were we doing 10 years ago? But what other food or what other drinks almost take 10 and 16 and 21 years to make? It's crazy when you actually think about it. It kind of rolls off our tongue. But yeah, 10 years ago, we went through the same distilling process, so we got the same malted barley. So a lot of whiskies are described as being malty. Now the 10-year-old for me is one of the best whiskies to train your nose on, that malty character. There's a complete absence of any smoke. It's matured mainly in bourbon barrels, so you're actually getting really into the heart of what whiskey made from malted barley. What's that initial aroma? And it's a sweet cereal aroma. A little bit earthy cereal. Yeah, so if you can train your nose on malty, that's the malty character. And the 10-year-old is one of the best ones to get your nose acquainted with that. On the nose then, again, we have that heart of Bushmills. You still get that fruitiness, but the fruitiness actually not as intense as in the Black Bush. So I call this much more of an elegant whiskey. This is more like a sipping single malt. Okay, then take a sip. Now the unusual thing about the 10-year-old, you get a dryness on the back of your throat, and you get this sweetness on the front of your palate. That contrast is very unusual in a whiskey. Normally you're all sweet or you're all dry, but to get that contrast is actually very unusual. And what you find then again, that sweetness begins to come up, rests on the front of your tongue, but then it's actually also going into your cheeks, and you get a little hints of honey. little hints of honey inside. And then each time you roll your tongue, you get vanilla, maybe even a little bit of apple pie. And again, that Bushmills subtle fruitiness then comes out each time you roll your tongue. But again, slight dry here at the end, nice sweetness and little hints of honey here. So it's a very elegant whiskey. It's a whiskey for sipping. People ask me what would I drink when I go home in the evenings. The 10-year-old it's just that nice, easy. It's not bombarding you with a whole load of flavors and characters. It's just nice. I suppose what the heart of what Bushmills and what really whiskey should be without any unusual casks.
Is that dryness coming because it's a mix of Oloroso and bourbon casks in this as well, right?
Yeah, it's nearly all bourbon. Just a few bourbon barrels, just to give it a hint of that sweetness and a hint of that fruity character. Nearly all though that bourbon first, second, and third fill casks. So again, it's getting the mix of the first and the second and third fill. We don't use any new wood at Bushmills. We feel that the new wood would tend to overpower the triple distilled character that's in the base spirit. So we have to be very careful. So what we do is we go and we get barrels that have been previously seasoned with bourbon or previously seasoned with sherry. So bourbon they like that very woody, oaky character. That's their tradition. What's great for us is it strips out a lot of the heavy woody oakiness in making bourbon. So when we get the barrels to Ireland, what's left behind then is this caramelized, sweet, vanilla character. So when you burn wood and burn oak, you actually caramelize a layer of sugars on the inside of the wood. So the level of char on the inside of the wood is really, you can have many different levels. So there's light, medium, heavy, and crocodile. So I like crocodile. I like the word crocodile. I don't particularly use a huge amount of it because it generates a huge amount of charcoal on the inside of the barrel, and it's difficult to get rid of all that charcoal. That's it.
We would love to see crocodile charred Bushmill ones one day. Maybe that's a future cask for us.
We'll try it. It evokes a nice, you'd understand it in Australia anyway. Yeah.
The Americans call it alligator char for the bourbon lovers in the room. They will no doubt correct us. But just reading a few of the comments here, Dave Cook says the 10-year-old single malt was his first ever single malt and started down the rabbit hole for him. So Dave, hopefully a bit of nostalgia here for you tonight. Revisiting an old friend.
Yeah, I think, look, we all need a little treat every now and again. And, single malts are worth spending that extra couple of bucks on. I think it does give you, that little sense of enjoyment and little nuances. Now, not particularly single malts are better. They just offer something a little bit different, more unusual. I suppose what single malts does, they tend to be older. So, obviously 10, 12, 16, 21, whatever age it may be, it's just that much longer in the barrel. So there is a classic, graph, not that I'm going to go into graphs here, but as the influence of the spirit declines over time, the influence of the wood increases over time. So basically, when we're creating blends, we try and see at what point do those interact and where across the line. So do we want more of a wood effect or more of a spirit effect? So typically single malts tend to have more of a wood effect because they're older and it takes longer to get that impact. But again, we have to be careful on what types of wood we use, what type of seasoned the woods get, because we're not trying to create a bourbon or we're not trying to create a sherry. We're just trying to get some of these subtle notes from them. But just again, for everybody, single malt, what's it mean? It's obviously two words. So the word single means it's all from one single distillery. So all of the whiskey is made in one location. And the malt, so single malt, the malt word means that it's made from 100% malted barley. So we just abbreviate that down to single malt means all from one distillery, all made from 100% malted barley. As I say, typically then a single malt will have a number beside it, which is in this case 10. So it has to be a minimum of 10 years old. At the moment, there's actually some 13-year-old whiskey in this 10-year-old, but what we put, we have to declare the minimum age, and the youngest age in this is 10.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you I've had some 10-year-olds in the past, and there's no doubt they've run out of stock at some point, or the distillery was shut down. And then, there's plenty of stories and people have created graphs online, and it gets super geeky very quickly. But just jumping into the comments, we've got a wonderful discussion here from mate, I'm struggling to pronounce your name today. Alte? No, I'm going to come back and try it again. Sorry. The nuttiness is amazing. Unbelievably how smooth it is from Trent. And then back to rice bubbles. I love this. This is a tasting note, and we're trying to call it dry cereal sweetness. So, mate, it's and Emma's jumped in with LCM snacks. Anyone? So, I'm not sure if people at home are getting that. Atlee. My apologies, mate. But yeah, that cereal note in the 10-year-old, it's not there in the Black Bush. It's, I don't know if it's sitting other people getting it, but it's quite unique.
Yeah, I would say that's that malty character that we described. So like whiskies around the world would have that malty adjective, I suppose, to describe them. But the 10-year-old is, I suppose, one of the best whiskies to train your palate on, and to get that malty character.
All right, shall we jump on to the 16?
Yeah, certainly. What I would say at this point as well, see the Douro cask. So this is my little sample here that we operate right at the distillery. I would actually pour your Douro sample at this point, and just we certainly need a little bit of time, and I think it improves hugely. We'll be there in about 15 minutes, and I think it's just nice to get to breathe a little bit. But on the 16, back to the 16 now. We'll leave the Douro. We won't touch the Douro. We just let it sit there. Hopefully, it won't overpower you too much in its aromas. The 16 to me, and again a little sneak preview of the new pack that's coming out. But again, the whiskey hasn't changed. So yeah, this is probably one of our biggest award-winning whiskies. People who are big Scotch drinkers that won't really look at bourbon and won't look at Irish whiskey. There's a lot of them out there, and people need to, I suppose, expand their palates. But if I can get a big Scotch guy to try this is the kind of entry into Irish whiskey for Scotch lovers. I think that I found that down the years that even those guys can't resist saying you've nailed it here. So what we do with the 16, again, it's a 16-year-old single malt, so it's from a single distillery made from 100% malted barley. So what we do after 16 years, so we put day one, we distill the same spirit, and we put half into bourbon barrels and we put half into sherry casks, and we allow them to mature for about 15 and a half, 16 years. At the end of that period, so we're nosing and sampling the casks all the time. We choose the casks to pick that will make the 16. And we marry the two whiskies together, the two cask types together in a port cask for about 6 to 9 months. So now we're getting influence from the bourbon barrel, we're getting influence from the sherry casks, and then that is finished in a port cask. And again, when we say finished at Bushmills, we mean 100%. So all of this, the mix of the bourbon and sherry casks, they're married together in this port. So what you get really then is just a magnificent nose. So we're back up, I suppose, intensity. If you like talking about the fruity character, back up. This is a level above Blackbush again in terms of that fruity character. So again, but very Bushmills. So what I love really, I suppose, when I take a sip on the 16, instantly I get the port here. So I get the port right at the back of my palate. And each time you roll your tongue, oh yeah, that's just right here. Then it begins to come back on, the sweetness, you get the Bushmills fruity character. More honey here, but what I'm getting now is you're going to get a much stronger nutty character. So, and it's kind of almonds. So if you ever had that almond on a Christmas cake, I think that's that top of that Christmas cake. Marzipan, that you guys call it marzipan, yeah?
Yeah.
And again, much bigger. Each time you roll your tongue, much bigger, bolder, fruity character. But again, you get the port here, big, bold Bushmills fruitiness. So it's like, it's summer fruits, you know, it's very strong. You know, raspberry, redberry, blackberry, it's kind of very almost mixed together depending on where your palate is. Each time you roll your tongue, you get that, the fruitiness intensifies. Then you start to get the nuttiness, that marzipan, almond, and little nice big strong honey on the inside. So much more intense than I was on the 10.
I saw a comment earlier on. I'm just trying to jump back to it. Where was it? I will find it. Someone mentioned before smooth, and I know whiskey connoisseurs will be like, "Oh, you can't use this as a tasting note or something," but it's a wonderful. Like, I've always been drawn to Bushmills because it's so easy. It's super sessionable for me. You can sip on it. You can go back for dram after dram, and it's like your palate just invites it. For me, it's it's a super sessionable whiskey.
I like to use the word smooth, but smooth doesn't mean bland. You know, smooth means smooth, but it's smooth with complexity, which is kind of, again, you know, it's a difficult, I suppose, phenomenon to get into your whiskey. But that's really the way that we have set up our distilling process, is to get that effect, to get that complexity in there. And then also it's a lot down to the way that we mature and the type of barrels that we mature. So as I say, we don't tend to use new bourbon barrels or new oak at Bushmills. New oak would overpower that triple distilled character in it. But what we do is we go and we get barrels from the US. So we have a very particular standard. So there's an Irish guy in the US, McLaughlin family, Paul. So they tend to get most of our barrels for us. So they'll look, and not from any particular distillery, but it's more, what's the thickness of the stave, what's the char levels, what's the construction of the barrels. So there is a select criteria that we use. So it's a little bit, I suppose, costs a little bit more, but I think it's well worth what you get when we get the barrels back to Ireland, the effect that it has. Also, then there's lots of barrels available from sherry, I suppose, on the open market. But again, I'm not 100% sure. The Bushmills way of doing it is that, no, we need to know where those barrels have come from. So we have a great relationship with a family in Spain. So in the southwestern part of Spain, they produce, that's the sherry producing region. It's called Jerez, Jerez. And again, I'm pronouncing that probably horribly wrong, but Jerez. So Antonio Paez is Labato is the name of the family. So Antonio and his family, they're coopers, so they actually make barrels, but they also have a bodega, so they make wines there as well. So they will go and make these barrels, 500 liters in capacity. So they're big barrels, and they're called sherry butts. They're called butts, just really it just describes the shape. They're kind of butty in the middle. They're a bit wider in the middle of the barrel, are a lot wider in the middle of the barrel than the ends. And they will put Oloroso sherry into those barrels for 3 years. We'll take the sherry out, and then we'll bring the barrels back. Now that's, if I'm honest, that costs a huge amount. So a bourbon barrel typically costs about $100 to bring back to Ireland. These barrels are custom made in Spain for us, are about 750 euros. So that, what's in terms of US or Oz dollars? Wow, what's that conversion there? That's 1,300, is it, something like that?
Yeah, so it's getting expensive.
Yeah, they're expensive. But the reason that Bushmills has stood the test of time, the reason that Bushmills really has been around for the last 400 years, is we just don't compromise in quality. So we haven't been able to afford these, very fancy marketing campaigns. So we need to really have our whiskey do most of the talking for us. So the reason for that we survived all these centuries is we just don't compromise. We on quality. It's all about the whiskey. It's all about the taste. So if we get the taste right, we'll do well. But we're willing to go and get these barrels back. Now we do similar things with the port barrels again for the 16-year-old. So we get them custom made, obviously, in Portugal. When we get to the 21, we have custom made barrels in Madeira, and Henriques and Henriques on the Madeira Island. So we get them custom made also. So, but as I say, quality in, quality out. So, and that really what is our mantra, and I suppose something that was ingrained in me when I first came to Bushmills, really, as master distiller.
For myself and us at the Whiskey List, people for all parts of the whiskey journey ask us what's a really good, whether it's a new Irish they want to try, or what's a good whiskey that's age statement around the 130, 140 Australian dollar mark. And Bushmills 16 is always in that top, 2 lists that we recommend. Not only is it the quality is consistent that we've just been talking about, it's just value for money and taste. Whiskey, age statement whiskey, especially all around the world, is getting more and more expensive. The cost of shipping, logistics, it's being passed to the consumer. We're seeing it, over a 5-year journey. Whiskey is getting more expensive. Demand is growing. But, distillers 10 years ago or 16 years ago couldn't anticipate today's demand. So they had to go with what they were making at the time and make some, projections. And a lot of distilleries are struggling, but Bushmills, continues that consistency and it's so good. I think just value for money as a 16-year-old whiskey, one of the best age statements in that price category.
Yeah, it's super. If as you say, if I knew what I know now 16 years ago, we would probably try to make some more. But and it's great. I think the more and more people, I think, are getting concerned about what they're eating and what they're putting in their bodies. So now all of a sudden we're looking at, well, hang on, where's that food come from? Where's that drink come from? Bushmills make it in the age-old way. So there's nothing artificial. So we're using the same water. We're using the same specification on the barley. We're using similar barrels, and that's it. We're even, the stills haven't changed shape. If we add any stills or change any stills, we keep that shape, which is important really to the flavor of the whiskey. And I think that's quite a frequent question: is how could the shape of a still affect the taste? And it is, it's crazy when you hear about it first, but logically what happens is, so we have the still shape, which is that, I suppose, almost like an onion shape again. So we have the big base and we have the narrower neck, which goes into the lie arm on the top. So what happens is, distilling is a little bit like your kettle at home. So when you put your kettle on at home, the energy goes into the coil in the bottom of your kettle, which heats up the water. And the water then heats up until 100 degrees. And when it hits around 100, then it turns it into a gas. So as it starts to boil, the water turns into steam. The steam gets out of your kettle, touches your window, and as it touches the window, it cools, and you convert it back into water again. So you condense it back into water. So what happens in whiskey distilling, now we have alcohol and water in the same still. As we heat it up, alcohol has a lower boiling point than water. So alcohol has a boiling point of around 77. Water has a boiling point of 100. So as we heat the still up, the alcohol tends to evaporate quicker than the water. So what distilling is really, it's a separation of two liquids with different volatilities, different boiling points. Now it's impossible in one distillation just to remove the alcohol and leave the water behind, because there's a whole lot of chemistry involved. So each time you do it, you're removing the strength all the time. So after the first distillation, we get to about 20% alcohol. On the second distillation, we get to about 70% alcohol. On the third distillation, we go all the way to 85% alcohol. And it's at that 85% that we capture that nice, smooth, fruity, floral character. And once we have it forever. Then we can actually put it into barrels and add complexity. We can leave it in the barrels for longer to add other complexity from age and more time to interact with the wood.
So
if we
comes
don't
off
get that triple distillation first, we won't ever have the flavors and the taste to finish. Sorry, Ollie. Yeah.
I'm sorry for butting in. I just wanted to ask. So it comes off the stills at 85 roughly percent ABV. Do you water it down a bit before you put it in the casks, or are you putting it in at 85?
Yeah, so if you were to 85, so as we go around the still house, and hopefully a few people on the call here will make the pilgrimage to Bushmills. If you put your finger in the 85% spirit as it's coming off the still. And you just literally, one, you can taste it. And it's amazing at 85 because of the way that we make the whiskey, because of the stills, because it's made by the world's greatest master distiller. No, I'm only joking. As it comes off the still, you're actually not going to burn your mouth. You'll actually get that fruity. All this I'm talking about, that's at the heart of Bushmills. That's at the heart of triple distillation. You'll immediately get that fruity, spicy, floral character straight away there. But what you'll also find after about 3 or 4 seconds, your finger will be dry again because it just evaporates off straight away. So if we were to put 85% spirit into an oak barrel, pretty much it would all evaporate off after a few years in the barrel because the barrel is actually porous. So what we do is we add pure water. So we have a water purification system here, and we reduce the strength down to about 60, well, it's exactly 63.4%. And at 63.4, we know that the alcohol will expand and contract in a nice, even fashion. So on the warmer summer days, it expands into the wood, and the cooler winter and the nights, it'll come back out of the wood. Because when we distill it, it's actually colorless. So the 85% is crystal clear. It's almost clearer than water, if that's possible. It's absolutely crystal clear. So when we put it into the barrel, as it goes and expands into the wood, it pulls out tannins and lactose and all these natural compounds that are in the wood. And obviously they all have a color to it. And really that's then where the color comes into the whiskey. So it's, and that's the journey. So as long as it's color, but it's also a lot of the flavors, characters. If it's toasted or roasted or if it's charred, then that'll give different characters as well.
It's super fascinating. I've just got a question here from David. We were actually just chatting about would love to try some new make spirit, and we got onto the topic organically. But he asks, is the tours A open now? COVID's kind of hopefully settled a little bit, and 2, is it wheelchair accessible?
Yeah, yes to both. So we've just now, literally, if you go on the website, we're still not officially open, but we're trying to have a soft opening where we're kind of putting like pre-booked groups. So basically people I know are ringing me up and I'm saying, yeah, sure, come in at such and such a time. And we're really trying to see how we manage to get people around the distillery, safely for everyone that works here and for everyone, our visitors as well. So I think we've come up with a good plan now. So I think rolling over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be pretty much fully open then. And yeah, so wheelchair accessible as well. Unfortunately, not all areas, because it's such an old distillery. We haven't been able to make some of the areas, but we have, I suppose, some of the areas with alternatives that really will be equally enjoyable for the event. So we welcome people from all areas and all abilities.
Yeah, great. Let's jump on the 16, just conscious of time. So if everyone can pour the 21. I've already done the 16. And just very quickly, while everyone's pouring the Bushmills 21, all your core range is 40% ABV, which I can't really think of too many other distilleries who are choosing to kind of bottle at 40. There's a marketing game, I think, happening with cask strength whiskies and, all different ABVs, but you keep it super simple, super easy, and I think super accessible, being at 40.
Yeah, look, Irish whiskey and Bushmills, we take our whiskey serious here at the distillery, but we want people to enjoy it. And I think we've tried at various different strengths, but I think just 40 hits the mark on our main 8 brands. For those people who prefer cask strength whiskies, obviously we have a number of whiskies that are available at higher strength, and obviously we're going to come on to the Douro as one. But no, I think 40 is just the sweet spot for most people. It really is. And I think to drink 40% neat, I think it's your palate is quite accepting of it. Once you start going to 45, 50, above, you need to be used to drinking that whiskey. You need to get your palate, I suppose, tuned into some of the stronger strengths to get, I suppose, some of the notes. So I don't want people just to taste alcohol. I want them to actually get some of the nuances from the different barrels, the nuances from the triple distillation. And I think that reacts best for most of our whiskies at 40.
Yeah, makes sense. Tell us about the 21.
Yeah, so the 21, again, it's 3 woods. So on day one, we put half this whiskey into bourbon barrels. We put half into sherry casks. At the end of 19 years or so, we'll take those whiskies out of both barrels and marry those 2 casks together. This is in a Madeira cask for 2 years, which makes it 21. So the Madeira, it's a different process. So I'm sure you all know Madeira is an island that's part of Portugal out in the Atlantic. They make these lovely Madeira wines. They actually have a process in there where they actually boil some of the part of the process, and so it tends to have a much deeper, darker note. So whereas I describe the 10 and the 16 as more on kind of a milk chocolate underbelly to it, the 21 is much more on the darker end, so dark chocolate, caramelized toffee. So on your nose, not quite coffee, not that strong, but again, it's just that pretty heavy, dark notes. And I think the principal notes here, and someone made a reference on the Blackbush to fruitcake or Christmas cake. If you had a rich fruitcake in a container and you open up that container after a few weeks, that initial aroma, that raisin, really heavy fruit, intense dry notes.
David just says here, "Oh my God, full on Christmas cake straight away." It just blows you in the face. That's the Madeira, right?
Yeah, there you go. So then take a sip. And again, immediately you get the much darker notes, darker chocolate, caramelized toffee. You get the heavy toffee notes here almost instantly. So you don't even get a chance to get down the back of your throat here. So it's almost, much heavier notes. Again, breathing in, you get like these hints of raisins. You can get the Christmas cake. Yeah. But to me, now try this. So a sign of a great whiskey is the finish. So the finish on the 21-year-old just lasts forever. It just goes on and on and on. And so, a lot of people say, "Ooh, 21, it's expensive," or a little bit more expensive. But by the time it takes you to drink one glass of 21, you probably have 3 or 4 Blackbush gone. So it's probably the same price. You need to take your time, linger, nice, relaxed environment, because you need to just enjoy it. Now, just for my sake, and try it. So we'll just have a look at the finish. So if you take a sip, okay, and swallow it, and now just close your lips for me. Now open your lips slightly and draw a breath of air over your tongue. And close your lips. Right now, all the flavors have come straight back onto your tongue. So you haven't drank any whiskey, you've just refreshed your tongue with air. All those flavors come back again. And that's a sign of a great finish. Those flavors and characters just stuck on your palate, and you're refreshing them each time with that just little intake of air. And you can do that several times and still get that same taste and same characteristics. So it is
I love we're getting tasting tips from a master distiller, because I've been to some brand ambassador tastings and they're good, but they're not giving you these little secret insights of the industry.
You can only do that on Bushmills, by the way. Yeah.
Atlee says almost burnt sugar as a tasting note. I'm getting a hint of that.
Totally, yeah. So it's much, as I say, it's really more on the dark end. So that, as I say, not quite coffee, burning sugar. It's more I'd call it caramelized sugar. Yeah. I think caramelized is a nicer word than burnt.
All right. If there's no other questions about the 21, I think it's time for the grand finale whiskey.
Yeah. So Causeway Collection, and I suppose I made reference to the Causeway, so I'm just going to pour a little bit of my.
I actually have a picture of it, so let me just share my screen if that's come up, hopefully.
Yeah.
There we go.
So it's very unusual in nature to have these perfectly 6 hexagons. So again, I think there's things like I think it's snowflakes and beehives and stuff like that. The only shape in nature that's regular, so that's here as well. So that's basalt rock. We're right beside here, so the distillery is right on the coast. So it's a beautiful part of the world. So again, I suppose one of my favorite places is actually out on the causeway. So the causeway hasn't shaved. So it was formed, millions of years ago by a volcanic eruption. So one of my favorite places in the world is out on the edge of the causeway with a Bushmills, on my own, just as the sun is setting. And if there's not many people around, you could almost be there 200 years ago, tasting the same whiskey, having the same notes, and exactly the same environment, and that's one of my special places. It might be too busy tomorrow on St. Patrick's Day to go out there, but I'll go out there on another day. So then the Douro. So yeah, so I think it's very poignant, and that's really, I suppose, where we came up with the Causeway Collection, in that we are, I suppose, indelibly linked with the Causeway. Our water flows over the same basalt rock. We have that same mineral. It's one of my favorite places in the world to drink. It's only a few kilometers away. So really, hence the inspiration of the name. What we try and do then, I suppose, we're dealing with a lot of whiskies that are in the warehouse. So there's lots of different age whiskies that are sitting in Bushmills warehouses that nobody knows about. There's a few of us at the distillery, obviously. So what we try to do is, I suppose, come up with something different, something that might just attract new people to drinking Bushmills. So we came up really, and I suppose on this one was Douro. So on my travels to Portugal to, I suppose, inspect. So each year I go to Portugal and we look at the port casks that we get for the 16. I just fell in love with the Douro. It's a river in Portugal, and it comes out into the sea in Porto. And if you go back along that river, it's just got beautiful wineries all the way along the river. And it's just, we think Bushmills is old, but those guys are insanely old. We used to get our casks from there years and years ago, originally. So I said, no, we need to do something with Douro. So love the red wine. So we got some Douro casks in. So it's actually, so it's 13 years old. Again, we wanted to be a bit different and say, no, we're going to use 13. We're going to have that spirit. So it was 2008 distilled. And for the first 8 years of its life. Sorry, I'm trying to do my maths here.
Yeah, 8 years.
8 years of its life. It was matured in pretty much 50-50 sherry and bourbon as well. So, and then what we did was we finished it in a Douro cask for the last 5 years. Now, again, we kept the strength high in this. Now, this is 56, and that's why I asked if, a few minutes ago, if you wanted to pour it and allow it just to breathe a little bit. And I think now you're really able to get your nose right in there. Have a second sip after we finish, and just drink it straight away. So pour it and drink it straight away, and just see the subtle differences. But now really on the nose, again, you get much dark, it's luscious, it's big berries, you can really get into that ripe plums. So it's very strong, I think, that fruity character, big berry plums. Now, the great thing about this is when you take a sip, it just melts on your tongue. It almost just goes, ooh. You don't feel it. It just spreads right across your palate instantly, and then just swallow it. Just take a sip, almost, and then your mouth. It's actually very fascinating for your palate. I start salivating very quickly because it just sits, melting, down, and then what you're left with is these lovely, warm, spicy notes, and good bit of black pepper. This is a strong whiskey, so it is going to be a nice big, bit of black pepper. Peppery on your nose, but also a bit of that pepper, strong kind of character to it on top of your palate. So you have this nice, warm, luscious, fruity plums and berries, but inside then as well, there's a little punch inside with that kind of black pepper in the background.
I've just put up a picture of the bottle there for those who haven't seen it before. So it's slightly different packaging to your normal Bushmills that we get available here, but the 13 years, the Douros up in front, created exclusively for Australia. I love that line in the middle there. So yeah, it's something that we as Australians got first pick of this. I know a few people from Ireland and UK and whatnot, Europe, have jumped and emailed us, and we said, look, if you can find a way back there, great. But we bought this entire cask to share with Australians who love their Irish whiskey, and hopefully introduce some people to the category as well. So we're very proud of this bottle. So I just wanted to highlight and show the picture of it.
Yeah, and at 56.6, it's probably one of the stronger single casks that you're going to have. So they're very unusual. So it's a good casks, very tight. So it was actually able to hold on to the strength. Typically, by strength, you lose around 0.5 to 0.75% alcohol every year. That's around that. We lose about 2% of the volume of the barrel every year. So when after 13 years, that's 26% of the volume will have disappeared. And that's really down to the barrel itself. As I say, the spirit will expand into the wood, but oak and the oak barrels are permeable. So it's very important that air is able to get in and that the vapor is allowed to get out. So the actual casks breathe themselves. And what happens over time is, so day one, we'll fill the barrels full. And as it loses volume, there's a space in the barrel that's left, and that's really the air pocket. And the air increases over time. So what happens is there is interaction with the wood and the spirit, wood and the whiskey, but also now air becomes important because there's interaction with the air also. And as the air pocket gets bigger, there's more interaction with the air, which gives you different flavors, different tastes, and different compounds. So that's really where we talk about complexity. All of that, even though the barrel is just sitting there, you don't, well, what's happening? It's all inside, and the whiskey's doing the work itself. The alcohol's expanding, contracting, in with the air, in with the wood, and that's really where we're taking up a lot of the complex notes, depending on what was previously seasoned in the wood itself.
On the notion of air and inoxidization, so I'm on my second bottle, just because I'm enjoying it so much. It's one of my favorite whiskeys of last year that we did. You drink it, let it sit for a few weeks, come back to it, and the spice notes will start to mellow out, and the fresh berries like blackberry and blueberry will then start coming to the forefront. And this whiskey will change. It won't mature anymore in the bottle, but the spiciness, I think, as it oxidizes a little bit inside over time, we've just had a 15-20 minute letting it breathe period, but letting it drink half your bottle, give it a month or so rest, come back to it, and then try it again, and it will change and get a little bit more fresher, I've noticed.
Yeah, and and again, that pepperiness, that spicy pepperiness, then will begin to abate a little bit as well. So yeah, again, that's the great thing about whiskey. It is the ever changing, evolving landscape. Even on your own palate, when you drink this at different times of the day or different days of the week, you will subtly get different notes yourself, because your palate is dictated a lot of the time with what you've eaten and drank earlier in that day or whatever. So your palate does change as well over the days and weeks.
So when it comes to picking any casks in your Causeway collection, like what's the process there? Do you start with a giant list? Do you raid the warehouse, the bond store? Like how do you pick single casks for a release? Like there's got to be some process to it.
Yeah, so I suppose initially it's just to get the barrel. So we're trying to be, I described earlier, I suppose my main job is to make sure that we have a consistency of taste, that Black Bush every year tastes the same, that the 10-year-old tastes the same. So that's crucial. But one of the key parts then is innovation. So how can we be different, and how can we, attract different consumers, and how do we fascinate our current consumers? So again, it starts really with, well, where can we get the different barrels? And I always like to have some connection or some idea with the story behind the barrels, and I think a lot of that is it. So we would do a lot of nosing and tasting of different wines and different alcohols and different spirits, and see if the spirit, and we feel that the cask they're matured in would actually be good and offer up something good for Bushmills. So I think that's really the start of the process. Then we get some of the barrels in that have been previously seasoned with Douro or Malaga or Banyuls, as they're all for the Australian market. And what is it that they're going to offer us? Something different. Again, we don't want the same taste in whiskey. We want some nuances, different nuances coming from. So then it's really a lot down to trial. So obviously we're putting a lot of whiskey in there into these barrels. We want to make sure it works. So 99 times out of 100 it'll work for us. There are the odd occasion where it doesn't. I got some Brazilian barrels and they were just horrible, to be honest, and we ended up having to distill the whiskey away. So but it's very unusual for that to happen. That was only once in 20 years. I don't want it to happen again. We just left it too long in the barrels. I was greedy. It was fantastic for the first kind of 3 months, and we left it 4 months, and it just tipped over the edge, and it wasn't very good.
Look, that's the fun of experimentation and innovation. Like, you won't know until you try. It could have worked out to be amazing, and then everyone will be going, "How did you do it?" But we don't talk about our failures, I guess, when we win, right?
No, that's it. Yeah.
Atlee mentions here, why are some of these for us only privileged? Look, America, Europe, Asia, they've for years, one of the reasons why we started the whiskey list is to help find great whiskey, get great whiskey here. And being a community of whiskey lovers, we can then go to amazing distilleries like Bushmills, knock on their door and go, "Hey, can we bottle something for Australia?" And that's core to one of the reasons why we started TWL, and distilleries like Bushmills and Colum and the team, and even Proximo who work with us down here in Australia. They've been so amazing to get this done in the middle of COVID as well. So there's been a few years coming and discussions, but yeah, they've made the journey incredibly easy, and now we're drinking great whiskey here. So thank you, Colum, and the whole team for making this happen.
Well, look, you deserve it. That's the end of it. As I say, we all need a little treat, especially in these hard times. So hopefully the hard times are getting less. We opened and we had to stay open all the way through COVID. So we were at work every day. So it wasn't, we were part of the food and drink were allowed to stay open throughout the whole piece. So we had a very dedicated team here that came to work every day. So it was tough last year. But look, we've all gone through there. We've all been there, and hopefully we're seeing the back of it now. There's an end in sight. I think there was times there when you couldn't see the end, wasn't it? But good. We kept making whiskey anyway through it, so that was the main thing. It was unaffected.
Yeah, great. It's good to know that you guys have kept the business going and all the jobs going. It's most important to look after your people, and in 10 years time, we might even be drinking a COVID cask or something like that. I don't know what the future holds, but to celebrate the occasion, because it was a testing time for everyone.
Very good. I see.
I've got a question here for you, Colum. Just to let everyone know, I've launched tonight's poll. We like to do a poll of voting for the favorite whiskey of the night. So if you all can jump on and vote while we're chatting. But the question for you is from Dave again. What's the oldest whiskey Bushmills has in the bond store currently?
Our oldest is 1975. So that's 47 years old. So yeah, we might have to leave some of that till we hit the magic 50, I think. But hopefully, I'd like to get some of that out a little bit earlier. So we don't have much. We only have, I think, 3 or 4 casks at that age. So when you get to that age, there's very little of it about. So again, it's how we're going to create, I suppose, a special pack for that as well. I like to see some other master craftsmen with the bottles, or so we need to come up with some good concepts to do it justice, I suppose. It's
I wouldn't mind even a 47, but a 50-year-old Bushmills would be amazing.
Yeah. So I'm excited. So hopefully it'll last till then. I'm always nervous when you go to these barrels every year. You just hope the barrel keeps intact and doesn't leak or anything silly like that.
All right. Just signing off on the comments. We'll jump through the results, and I think, Colum, you've got to get back to work because it's a early
My
start
day's
for
already
you.
started. You guys are getting ready for Patrick's Day as well. It's nearly 12 o'clock is what time is it there?
Yeah, Tom says all amazing to drink. It's very different listening to a distillery that's been around for 300-400 years, 400 plus, mate. It's oldest.
Yeah.
Um,
1608, yeah.
Especially when comparing to the Australian tastings, Australian whiskey we've done, that are 3-4 years old. It's the precision is impressive. Knowing to 0.1% what the best proof is to put in a barrel, etc. The years of practice, obviously pays off, mate. But Tom, what a great compliment. Thank you.
Great. No,
And,
look, I hope everybody enjoyed it. It is good. And look, I'll leave you with a little toast. Oh, sorry, you're still doing the poll.
I've just shared the results, and then we'll do a quick toast afterwards. So we've got a couple of votes for the Black Bush, the 10 and the 16. The Bushmills 21-year-old actually wins at 45% to 41% preference for the Douro. So there you go. It's a very, very tight audience tonight, but the 21 reigns supreme. Well done.
Good. Well, again, there's a whiskey in there to match all the tastes, and that's I like to see. Some people like Black Bush as well. So just because it's a higher price doesn't mean it's better whiskey as well. So, but that's what the range is for. So match your taste, match your occasion. If you're having a few drinks, you'll probably have Black Bush. You're having one or two, you'll have probably a 21 or something like that, or the Douro, for that special occasion, that birthday or that special moment in your life. So look, anyone that does a tasting with me automatically becomes part of the Bushmills family. So welcome to the family, and may you long drink Bushmills and enjoy it. And I go, look, don't stop drinking bourbon, or don't stop drinking whiskey, but just keep Bushmills in mind and keep that in your locker. It offers something a little bit different than a lot of other whiskies don't have. So a little toast. There are tall ships, there are long ships, there are ships that sail the sea, but the best ships are friendships, and may they always be. So slán to everybody, and happy St. Patrick's Day, and enjoy the whiskey.
Slán Colum, and I'm loving that Emma's just shaking her head at that wonderful poem, and we got claps from the audience from Abby, Damien. So got some amazing comments. Lynn, thank you. Great tasting. Thanks, Colum. Terry, really appreciate your valuable time with us. Jace, cheers. David Fuller, awesome tasting with great and entertaining insights. Yeah, thank you from Trent, from the audience, and from us at the Whiskey List. Colum, thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and I will bid good night to everyone. I might just get Colum and the Proximo team just to hang back for a tiny brief debrief. But otherwise, yeah, I wish everyone a good night and see you at the next tasting.
Good. I hope I'll see you in Australia sometime.
We would love to host you, mate. So let us know when you're coming down, and we'll have you over.
All right, great. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.